Welcome to the next part of my Android with Kotlin and Jetpack crash course. This is part 2 of the Jetpack navigation stuff, just how to show you to get started with that. So let's carry on. So now that we have all our stuff kind of set up, we actually need to, in our title fragment, specify what action needs to be used under which condition. So when the user does X, we want a transition to happen between, the title fragment and a different destination. In this case, the water level list fragment. So remember that in our navigation XML, we have an action defined that kind of represents that transition, and this action is called action title fragment to water level list fragment. Okay, and it tells us that the destination is the water level list fragment, right? So because when we fire the application up, we've specified our start destination as title fragment, and then if they do something, we want this action to fire, and it will result in it going to this destination, which is just this fragment over here. Okay, so let's have a look at how to do that. So inside of our onCreate method, what we got, I've done it right at the bottom here. ViewModel.navigate to water level ID, and I'll show you what that is in a moment. It's another LiveData. And we're observing that LiveData. So we're saying when this navigate to water level ID LiveData changes, we want to take the water level ID, so the actual value that's changed, and we want to find our nav controller, again the thing that controls the navigation, and we want to tell it to navigate. So this is actually sort of actions, or executes the action, it makes the transition happen, that navigate method. And what navigation we want to do, we just tell it which action. So title fragment directions, which is another generated class for you. You don't need to create that yourself. And this method's generated for you as well. Action title fragment to water level list fragment. You see the out corresponds to what we saw in navigation XML. It's just kind of camel caps it and taken the underscores out. And then we're passing through, this is just basically the water level ID. Okay, so that's going to actually, this little piece here is saying to us when the navigate to water level ID observable changes, we fire off a navigation from title fragment to water level list fragment, because that's what's defined by that action. And then to finish it off, we just tell it that we are done navigating. So let's have a look at how these things work in the view model. Okay, so we've defined the navigate to water level ID LiveData, just like we defined our other LiveData in our other fragment, in that it's got a mutable version and a private mutable version and a public non-mutable version. And yeah, what it's basically doing is, what we're saying is, if we set this to a non-null value, then we want the transition to happen and pass through that ID as the parameter for the transition, right? Otherwise, don't do anything if it's like a null value. So that's why when we're done navigating, we set it back to null to show that we are done. But we have a method here saying on water level clicked, and that's actually what I want to be the event that the user performs, which causes the navigation to happen. I want when the water level is clicked, I want that to happen. So I've got a method called on water level click that passes through a water level ID, and it then sets the value of the navigate to water level ID, which we set with dot value. We don't need to set it with post value here because it's not on a background thread. So we can just set it with dot value, and we set it to the water level ID. Okay, so so when this method is called, it will actually result in the navigation happening. So where do we call this method? Right, let's have a look. So we call it inside of our fragment title XML over here. Okay, so this text view, the one that says like the percentage full that the thing is, it'll say like 63% or whatever, and you click on that 63%, you just tap it, and this onClick method will be fired, right? Now I could have done this in my fragment itself. You can specify click lists and stuff there, but you can also do it right here in the layout file using like a lambda like this, and you basically just say, okay, when this thing is clicked, I want you to call title view model dot on water level clicked. Remember, that's the name of the method that we just saw on the view model, and we want you to pass through title view model dot most recent water level ID. Okay, so that's the parameter. And that, so when they click it, it'll go into this method here. It will set the water level ID, and that will, because of this observation happening here, sorry, not in this fragment, in the title fragment, because of this observation happening here, it will result in navigation occurring, and then it will say, okay, now we are done navigating. Okay, so let's have a look at the navigation quickly. So if we, our text view that we made clickable is this one that shows 63.6%. So I'm going to tap that now. And as you can see, it transitioned to something with the label at the top there, water level list, which is the label we specified in our navigating XML for that fragment. And it says water level ID is 1, where 1 is that argument or the parameter that we kind of pass through as part of our transition between this fragment and this fragment. Okay, so now what if we want to actually change our transition animations? So if we just go back to our design view here, you'll see if we click on the action, which is the arrow, it tells us that our enter, exit, pop enter, and pop exit's all just these default ones, right? That's what we had originally. Now you can see I've got some more options, right? I've got a few more options here. And let's have a look, let's have a look at what those are. So I've created a bunch of new animation XML files. So you can create these yourself, and then you can actually set them here. So we've got inside of res, I created an anim, short for animation, directory rather, and I've created a bunch of XML files in here. So here's like a fade in transition, for example. You're basically saying, okay, we want to change the alpha, which is like the transparency or the opacity. You want it to start from 0, and you want it to become 1. So it's like completely transparent and becomes completely opaque, and it does that transition. Fade out would be the opposite. You want it to start at 1, and you want it to go to 0. Okay, so there's fade in and fade out. Slide in left. So this actually makes, to transition slide. What we have there is you've got the x delta, so where you want this thing to start from on the kind of x-axis, negative 100%, from y delta 0 to x delta 0 and y. So the y doesn't move here at all, it just slides in from the left. So it goes from negative 100, which is kind of off screen on the left, to 0, right? And slide in from the right, as you may have guessed, would go from 100 to 0, right? And the y doesn't change. Slide out left is then where it starts at 0 and it goes to negative 100, and slide out right is where it starts at 0 and it goes to 100. So those are some other options for animations, which then can be used in your navigation XML transitions. So we can say, for example, we want enter to be slide in left, and we want exit to be slide out left, for example. And then we can see what happens there and how that changes. And of course it changes in your XML view as well. We just changed it in the design view, but it keeps it consistent obviously with what's in the actual navigation XML. Okay, so let's have a quick look at what the transition of the navigation looks like now that we've changed our animation to use slide in and slide out. So again, I'm going to click on 63.6%, so that text view, and you can see it's slide in. Now we didn't change the kind of back navigation, so that should still be the same as the default. So it's like more of a fade. There we go. Slide in, slide out, bit of fade, slide in, slide out. And that's it. Okay, so one other thing to note about navigation is the pop behavior. So you first need to understand how this navigation is kind of implemented to understand this. And it's quite simple. It's just a stack. So when you're viewing the title fragment, which is our start destination, there's one fragment basically on the stack. There's one destination on the stack. And when you make a transition, in our case to the water level list fragment, then a second item is pushed onto the stack. So, how stacks work, it's, first in, first out. So, last in, first out. So LIFO. And in this case, the last one on top would be the water level list fragment. And yeah, so that one's on the top now, and when you then press back, it pops that one off. So the water level list fragment will come off, and then the title fragment's the one that you'd be viewing, and that's on the top. So it's a back stack is what they call it. Now, when you let your navigation controller just like by default control this stuff, that's basically just how it works. You transition from one fragment to another, it just keeps adding them onto the stack, pushing them onto the top, and as you press back, it pops them off one at a time. So your forward movement through the different actions and across the different destinations would be the backward movement would be exactly the same in reverse, one at a time. But if you don't want that to happen, like if there's a case where maybe you go from fragment 1 to fragment 2 to fragment 3 to fragment 4 to fragment 5, and maybe you were filling out a quiz or something like that, and then fragment 5 is the one that says well done on completing the quiz. When you press back, you wouldn't want to go to fragment 4 where it was showing you part of the quiz, and then fragment 3 where it's showing another part of the quiz. You would want to probably just go straight from back, from fragment 5 all the way to fragment 1, if that's like your title fragment. So think of title fragment and then 2, 3, 4 and completed fragment. So you would want your forward motion to be different to the back motion, right? So you can do that by specifying the pop behavior over here. So we only have 2 fragments, so it wouldn't make any difference for us, but we could say like when the user transitions from this fragment to this fragment via this action, when they then press back, we actually want it to go straight to title fragment, which happens to be what it would go to here anyway, but you could specify any fragment there, and you could see that it would say title fragment pop up to title fragment as part of this action, right? So that's what it does if you do not select inclusive. So inclusive is telling you whether or not it's going to pop this one off as well. So if you don't select inclusive, right, then it'll just keep popping stuff off the stack until it reaches title fragment, and then it will stop, and then that's what you would see is title fragment. However, if you made it inclusive with a tick there, and then you see that's not the default, that's why it would then have to specify inclusive true. If you do that, then it's going to actually pop this one off as well. So it would keep popping off the stack when you press back until it finds title fragment, then it would pop that one off also, and it would show you whichever fragment was actually one below that on the stack originally. So that's how this pop behavior works. So in a lot of cases it might be fine to just have it set like by the default like that, and it just have it pop one level up, but where you want to override that default one level up popping, you can specify a different fragment, and it doesn't redirect it to that fragment. It will pop things off the stack until it finds that fragment, and then it will stop if inclusive is false, and if inclusive is true, then it will pop that one off as well that you specified and stop at the next one down on the back stack. And that's it. Thanks for watching. Now you have your basic navigation up and running. I hope you found it useful. And as always, learn something, and please keep watching the Crash Course videos and subscribe to my channel if you're enjoying what you're seeing.